Tonight we're slathering sheep fat on our foreheads, listening to someone play flute through a wall, and trying to drift off in the weird, candlelit world of 18th century France, where insomnia wasn't just a nuisance, it was practically an art form. You're lying in a lumpy feather bed inside a creaky townhouse somewhere between Rue Saint-Honoré and total mental collapse. The window is cracked to let in some fresh air, which in this case smells like horse droppings, someone baking week-old garlic, and the faint but persistent panic of a rat in existential crisis. The moon casts a silvery rectangle across your blanket, which would be romantic if you weren't wide awake and counting every heartbeat like it owes you rent. This isn't just any night. This is your fifth, no, sixth, consecutive evening of not sleeping. You've tried everything modern sensibility can offer, fluffing the pillow, rotating like a roast chicken, and blinking very hard in hopes of boring yourself unconscious. Nothing has worked. Even the mattress sighs when you move, like it's disappointed in you. Oh, and the worst part? You're pretty sure the downstairs maid is asleep upright in a chair. Meanwhile, your thoughts are doing interpretive dance routines about mortality, mold, and whether the baker down the street is secretly in love with your cousin. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from, and what time it is there. Misery loves company, especially in multiple time zones. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ceiling above you groans with the shifting of beams older than your ancestors. A mouse skitters across the rafters with the subtlety of a street performer, and the candle at your bedside flickers like it's losing faith in the evening, too. You shift again. The bedsheets are scratchy linen, not unpleasant, but definitely woven by someone who never personally had to sleep on them. You exhale, slow and deliberate. Mainstream historical fact: sleep in 18th century France wasn't measured in 8-hour chunks. People often had segmented sleep, 2 phases separated by a wakeful period around midnight. This first sleep and second sleep rhythm was so normal that manuals actually referenced what to do during the gap. Which, in your case, is mostly regretting that second bowl of mutton stew. You sit up. Your nightcap slides slightly sideways, as if it too is giving up. You reach for the pewter water cup on your bedside table, but it's lukewarm and tastes faintly of ceiling dust and disappointment. Downstairs, the floorboards moan under someone's heel. You're not alone in your sleeplessness, which is weirdly comforting. Probably your uncle pacing again, muttering about crop taxes. Or possibly the neighbor's cat. Or possibly both, together, in some sort of spectral tax-concerned feline alliance. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed. The floor is cold, and your woolen slippers, embroidered with small, angry-looking swans, offer exactly zero emotional support. You shuffle to the window and peek out. The street is dead quiet. Not a single carriage. Just the distant flicker of a lantern and the outline of chimneys like a skyline of weary noses. Somewhere a dog barks once, like it's making a point. Then silence again. You press your forehead to the glass, wondering how your neighbors are sleeping through all this. Maybe they're using laudanum. Maybe they're just deeply boring people. Or maybe they've got something you don't. Sheep fat. Yes, you heard right. It's the talk of the salons lately. The latest physician-approved miracle for sleeplessness. Applied warm to the temples, supposedly it calms the nervous humors and encourages dream thought. There are pamphlets. Testimonials. A woman in the Marais swears she hasn't had a nightmare since switching to Mouton Serenite Extra Pur. Historians still argue whether this was purely pseudoscience or whether certain fatty applications genuinely soothed the skin and helped regulate temperature, which could aid sleep. Or maybe everyone just smelled so strongly of livestock that they passed out from the aroma. You head back to bed, brain buzzing like a salon full of caffeinated poets. Your sheets are slightly warmer now. The candles burned low. Still, you don't lie down. Instead, you stare at the ceiling and consider your options. You could count sheep. You could recite Latin poetry backward, which your tutor claimed builds character but mostly gave you headaches. You could go down to the kitchen and warm a bit of milk, though the last time you tried that, the maid threw a spoon at your head. Or you could finally give in and try what everyone else has been whispering about. Fat. Rendered. From a sheep. On your face. You glance at your nightstand. There's a little sealed tin tucked into the drawer, gifted by your physician, who had too many rings on his fingers and too little restraint when naming ointments. Somniferous. Disturbing. You roll it between your fingers. One thin line of sheep fat away from sleep. One greasy forehead away from peace. Outside, the street remains still. Inside, the long shadows stretch toward you like fingers asking you to try. You lie back, stare at the beams once more, and whisper aloud. Fine. Let's try your greasy voodoo. You unscrew the tin of somniferous with the same caution you'd use opening a suspiciously quiet snake basket. The lid gives with a faint pop, releasing a puff of something earthy, waxy, and not to put too fine a point on it, very much like sheep. Not just the idea of sheep. No. This is deep sheep. Like you've just leaned your face into a warm ewe on a summer afternoon and said, "Hello, old friend." The fat is a pale, waxy beige, somewhere between candle wax and regret. You dip 2 fingers in and scoop a thumbprint's worth, holding it up to the candlelight. It glistens mournfully. It jiggles slightly. You pause and whisper to no one in particular, "What have I become?" Then, slowly, gingerly, you press the fat to your forehead. Mainstream historical fact: sheep fat, or suif, in 18th century French, was widely used not just for candles and cooking, but in medicinal salves. Physicians of the day believed that warm fat could soothe everything from toothaches to sleeplessness, by softening the skin and calming the nerves. Of course, they also prescribed powdered mummy and powdered pearl, so maybe don't take it too seriously. You massage it in using small circles, trying to feel fancy about it. The fat spreads with reluctant ease, slightly melting from your body heat. It's greasy, yes, but also oddly comforting, like tucking your forehead under a cozy, invisible blanket. If that blanket smelled like barn. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, weirdly, your skin warms. Not unpleasantly. More like a low, slow kind of heat, as if the fat is whispering, "Sure. I got this." You lie back on your pillow. The sheets pull slightly against your oiled skin, which feels like sleeping on a buttered biscuit. You exhale. You close your eyes. And immediately open them again. Because your forehead now feels like it's hosting a small pet. You're acutely aware of every pore. The silence of the room is punctuated by your own blinking. This is not sleep. This is sheep fat awareness hour. You groan and reach for the tin again, scanning the label for instructions. The back reads, in elegant script, to be applied liberally to the temples, accompanied by gentle fluting. You blink. Fluting. That wasn't mentioned during your consultation. You remember vaguely that the physician did say something about harmonic sedation, but you assumed that was just his cologne. You slump back against the pillow, sighing into your oiled skin. Quirky historical tidbit: some high society households employed flute boys, young musicians trained to play delicate, repetitive melodies outside a patient's door to soothe them to sleep. Sometimes, it worked. Other times, the flute boys were pelted with candied nuts and told to stop playing the same tune for the 7th time in a row. You do not have a flute boy. You do, however, have a tiny tin whistle buried in your bedside drawer. A gift from your cousin who claimed it improved digestion and morale. It has not. But right now, it's the closest thing you've got to a professional-grade lullaby. You pull it out and give it a test blow. The resulting note is sharp. Accusatory. Somewhere between an injured duck and a kettle full of ghosts. A floorboard creaks in protest. Someone coughs upstairs. Okay, not that note. You try again, softer this time, just a breath across the metal. A low, almost imperceptible whistle spills into the room, twirling lazily like dust motes. You hold the note as long as your lungs allow, then let the silence settle back in. You do it again. Then again. Eventually, it becomes a rhythm. Breath. Whistle. Silence. Repeat. A bedtime metronome for the mentally frayed. You lie back, eyes half closed, as the fat settles deeper into your skin and the tin whistle hums in your hand. Your other hand flops to your side like a sleepy fish. For the first time tonight, you don't feel like launching yourself through a window. Progress. Historians still argue whether these elaborate bedtime rituals were effective or simply elaborate performances of status. After all, not everyone could afford a flute boy, a custom sheep fat blend, or a bed large enough to roll dramatically across. But the obsession with sleep, that was universal. Nobles, peasants, philosophers, everyone knew that if you didn't sleep, eventually, you'd start speaking in spoonerisms and developing intense emotional relationships with wallpaper patterns. You turn onto your side, the fat gently smearing across your pillow in a smear of questionable life choices. The tin whistle rests beside your head like a strange little sleep companion. You inhale deeply. The room smells of wax, linen, and the vague dignity you left behind 3 applications ago. You're warm. You're tired. You're still awake. You sit up again with the sigh of someone who's already aged 5 years since nightfall. The candle sputters at your bedside. The shadows on the wall look like they're mocking you. The sheep fat feels smug. You consider, very seriously, applying more. But then you hear it. A faint flute melody. Not yours. Soft. Distant. From the house next door, perhaps. A quiet, high trill followed by a falling note that glides downward like a sigh. Then again. Repeating. Comforting. You sit still. Somewhere nearby, another sleepless soul is employing their own flautist, or maybe the flute boy is freelance now. Either way, you let the sound float in through the window. You lie back, and this time, your body sinks heavier into the mattress. The sheep fat holds you in place like a slow, oily hug. The flute notes dance at the edge of your awareness. You begin to count them, like sheep. 1, 2, 3. You lose track by 11. Not because you're asleep, but because, for the first time, you think you might be getting close. By the time your pillow has absorbed enough sheep fat to qualify as a side dish, your eyes have glazed over like a pastry. You're not asleep, but you've softened around the edges. That counts for something in this era. You roll to your back again, forehead slicked with now room temperature lard and arguably at peak shininess. Your scalp itches under your nightcap, and the skin around your temples feels both silky and profoundly haunted by agricultural choices. Still, you feel tranquil. Slightly greasy, but tranquil. The flute next door has stopped. Either the player got bored, fell asleep, or was quietly silenced by a fed-up relative. You imagine a powder-wigged aunt bursting into the room, flinging a chamber pot lid and yelling, "Enough with your goat music, Bernard," before slamming the door and extinguishing the candle with pure disdain. You chuckle softly. Then realize you may be delirious from inhaling sheep vapors for an hour. Mainstream historical fact: physicians and apothecaries in the 18th century believed that restorative animal substances applied to the skin could harmonize bodily humors, especially black bile, the humor most associated with melancholy and, by extension, insomnia. In fact, treating sleeplessness often involved a whole cascade of rituals: topical ointments, teas, music, incense, and even prayer. But tonight, you've skipped the prayer part, mostly because you can't quite bring yourself to ask any divine being to bless your forehead glaze. The fat has begun to set. Your skin is no longer tacky, just hydrated, possibly preserved. You touch it lightly and your fingers glide like you're prepping a roast. There's a faint clink at the door. Your maid has left a cup of something on the floor without knocking. She's a genius. Or a witch. Or both. You shuffle over and pick it up. Warm to the touch, faintly herbal. Lettuce tea. Yes. You've heard of this one. Quirky historical tidbit. Lettuce, especially wild varieties like Lactica virosa, was used as a sedative by 18th century apothecaries. Boiled into a tea, it was said to calm the nerves, settle digestion, and unpin the soul from the day's worries. It was also incredibly bitter and, in large doses, could act as a mild narcotic, earning it nicknames like opium lettuce. You sniff it. It smells like boiled grass and old library parchment. You sip anyway. It's warm, but carries the subtle aftertaste of guilt and forgotten salad. Still, you drink it. Slowly. It doesn't taste like sleep. It tastes like you're being punished for poor choices made during dinner. But strangely, it does calm you a bit. Or maybe that's just the warmth making its way down your esophagus and convincing your stomach to stop filing formal complaints. You return to bed, setting the empty teacup down like it was a goblet at Versailles. You feel marginally more relaxed. Also mildly poisoned. But still, progress. Outside, the wind picks up ever so slightly, brushing against the shutters in a way that sounds like someone politely scratching to be let in. You stare at the ceiling. Your eyes feel heavy, but your thoughts are still pirouetting in soft slippers. Sleep is close. You can smell it. Or maybe that's just the mutton vapor still clinging to your forehead like a ghost in sheep's clothing. Historians still argue whether these nightly rituals, tea, music, ointments, had any real medicinal value or were simply elaborate social performances, especially among the upper class. But when you're this tired, you'll believe in anything. Mercury foot baths? Sure. Whispered prayers to Saint Dymphna? Great. A cheese wheel under the bed for dream stability? Put it there. You close your eyes again. The darkness behind your eyelids is softer now. Less full of mental marionettes. More like velvet. You count backward from 10, slowly. 10, your heartbeat in your ears. 9, the way the sheets cool slightly when you shift. 8, the taste of lettuce still clinging like a leafy ghost to your tongue. 7, Brigitte, the maid, humming earlier in the day while stirring something that may or may not have been stew. 6, the feeling of the candle's warmth on your hand as you lifted the tin of fat. 5, the vague memory of your mother insisting baths after sunset were the devil's invention. 4, your cousin falling asleep face first into a harp at dinner. 3, whispers of flute music from earlier, still echoing in your imagination. 2, the rustle of a mouse in the pantry, conducting business. 1, your breath, slow now. Measured. You open your eyes again. Still not asleep. You sigh. Loudly this time. And then, like some sort of betrayal, your body lets out a full yawn. You weren't even expecting it. One of those big ones that makes your jaw click slightly and your eyes water. You blink in surprise. Then yawn again. Bigger. Deeper. A third yawn. You start laughing quietly. Because now your body thinks it's sleepy. It's a trap, clearly. You lie down again. Your arms flop to your sides like reluctant puppets. You pull the blanket up to your chin and stare at the darkened rafters above. The candle's out now. Just the glow of the embers in the fireplace remains, pulsing like a distant heartbeat. You whisper, "Fine. I surrender." You close your eyes once more, just to see what would happen if you stopped trying. The sheep fat, now fully absorbed, emits a faint warmth. The lettuce tea curls like fog in your stomach. The music still echoes faintly in your mind. And, for the briefest of moments, you hover at the edge of sleep. Not quite in it. But almost. Almost. You're dreaming, maybe. Or you're just lying so still that your brain is staging illusions out of boredom. Either way, there's a flute again. But this time, it's not in your imagination or your neighbor's parlor. It's real. Soft, deliberate, and drifting somewhere just beyond your door. The sound isn't intrusive. It doesn't demand your attention. It offers it. Like an outstretched hand in a quiet hallway. You listen without moving, body still under the covers, eyes half closed, as the notes slide through the gaps in the walls. One note holds. Lingers. Then another, lower. Then three in a row that ripple upward like water dripping into a bowl. You blink. Then realize the flautist is in your house. Mainstream historical fact, in 18th century France, it wasn't unusual for aristocrats or the wealthier bourgeois to hire live musicians specifically for sleep enhancement. Some would commission flautists or harpists to play from a hallway or an adjacent chamber while the household dozed. The theory was that certain tones could soothe the vital spirits and quiet the tempestuous blood. Essentially, lo-fi beats to sedate Enlightenment minds. You don't remember hiring a flautist. But your uncle has been known to order strange things in his sleep. Once he commissioned a marble bust of Cicero mid-snore. It was delivered 2 weeks later, and no one has dared move it since. The flute continues. The melody is simple, repetitive, intentionally so. Designed to lull. No showy arpeggios, no Bach-inspired ego trips. Just a calm, slightly melancholic waltz for one. You sit up slowly, the blanket sliding off your shoulders. The floor creaks beneath your toes as you step lightly toward the door. The music gets clearer now. Someone is seated near the end of the corridor, just beyond your bedroom, backlit by a flickering oil lamp and swaddled in what looks like a velvet cloak. The flautist doesn't look up, doesn't speak. Just plays. You hover at the edge of the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt or bow. Instead, you lean against the frame and listen. Quirky historical tidbit: there are recorded instances of flute performers, usually young men, trained in both etiquette and music, being employed not just for bedtime serenades, but as indicators of household prestige. It became trendy in some Parisian circles to boast about having the quietest flautist in Montmartre. At least one duel was fought over a stolen musician. The notes change slightly now. The flautist adjusts the rhythm, slipping into a variation that resembles the lullabies nannies hum to restless children, only this one seems written specifically for the overtired and emotionally fragile. Which is a little on the nose, honestly. You glance down the hall. No one else seems awake. Just you and this mysterious musical ghost haunting your floorboards. You finally speak, voice a whisper. Who hired you? The flautist pauses for a beat, then simply says, "Your aunt." Of course she did. Your aunt, collector of wigs, critic of ceilings, and passionate believer in goat's milk as a cure-all. She must have seen you dragging through dinner earlier, yawning into your soup, and decided to intervene with her usual flair. You say, "I thought you were next door." The flautist gives a small smile. "I was." She outbid them. You nod slowly. That tracks. The melody continues. You return to your bed, the notes now following you like scent trails in the air. You pull the covers over your shoulders again, nestling into the sheep-fat pillow with only a little bit of shame. The music wraps itself around your ribcage like a warm hand. Historians still argue whether these musical interventions actually improved sleep, or if they were more about ritual, creating the conditions under which a person expected to fall asleep. Like a form of hypnotic suggestion through status and sound. But right now, it's working. Sort of. You feel the knots in your shoulders loosen. Your breath slows. Your mind wanders down gentler corridors. You imagine the flute player practicing in a cold attic, perfecting the art of barely their melodies. You imagine your aunt pacing in her silk robe, declaring only very quiet flutes. None of that shrieking Baroque nonsense. You imagine your pillow judging your life choices as it drinks up a second coat of lard. You almost drift off. And then, footsteps. Not from the hall. From above. The attic creaks ominously. A slow, dragging step. Then another. Then silence. You sit up, the spell broken, heart suddenly beating loud enough to qualify as percussion. The flute pauses. You both freeze. Then, from the flautist, probably the cat. You exhale. Right. Probably. Still, your nerves have gotten a jolt. That warm, sleepy bubble popped. You flop back into bed with a groan and cover your face with the blanket, as if the woven linen can protect you from attic cats or attic ghosts or attic regrets. The flute resumes, softer this time. Gentle. Almost apologetic. You let it wash over you. You try to float again. Back to the edge of sleep. You get close. So close. But your eyes refuse to fully close. You whisper to the ceiling, "I am so tired. Please." It doesn't answer. The music ends. The flautist's footsteps fade down the hall. You're alone again. Still not asleep. But quieter, inside. Just a little quieter. You wake up. Well, not wake up. You just re-notice that you're awake. The long stretch of quiet after the flautist left must have lured you into something almost like sleep. But now, the room feels different. Heavier. More still. The kind of still that makes your ears ring with their own loneliness. The candle is out. The teacup is dry. The sheep fat has cooled and solidified into a glossy shell across your temples like you've been lightly varnished by farmhands. You lift a hand to scratch an itch and feel your own slick skin. Somehow, the word mayonnaise floats through your mind, uninvited. You lie still for another minute. Then another. Then your bladder gently taps your consciousness on the shoulder and says, "Good evening. I, too, have concerns." Of course. You sigh very slowly and begin the delicate task of getting out of bed without waking the entire house or dislodging your soul. Mainstream historical fact: in 18th century homes, chamber pots were a nightly necessity. There were no indoor toilets as we know them, just ceramic bowls placed discreetly under beds or in corner cabinets, emptied, hopefully, each morning. These were used in total darkness, usually by touch, and emptied with the discretion of a spy smuggling royal secrets. Your chamber pot lives inside a wooden cabinet at the foot of your bed, decorated with delicate hand-painted flowers, because apparently that makes it classier. You shuffle to it in your nightshirt, wool slippers barely muffling your movement. You mutter apologies to the room itself, which seems to sigh in mild betrayal as you open the little door and sit down. It's not glamorous. But it is, in a way, part of the ritual. A midnight confrontation with your humanity. A humble sit. A vulnerable moment in a house full of stiff upholstery and stricter rules. You finish, close the lid, and tiptoe back to bed. You're just about to crawl under the covers when a sound stops you cold. Voices. Not in your room. Not in your head, thankfully. Through the wall. Soft, muffled chatter from the townhouse next door, bleeding through the thin plaster like whispers wrapped in cotton. You creep to the window and press your ear against the cold glass. Their shutters are open just a crack enough to let out light and intrigue. Quirky historical tidbit: because many homes were constructed in rows with shared walls, nighttime gossip was an unintentional form of entertainment. Whole families could and did overhear their neighbors whispering about debts, inheritances, love affairs, and who added too much vinegar to the lentils. Some people became amateur spies from sheer boredom. Tonight, the conversation appears to involve 3 people. One sounds raspy, older. One is high-pitched and animated. The third keeps laughing, poorly timed, slightly unhinged laughter that bursts through the dialogue like a hiccup. You can't make out every word, but you catch enough. Pierre's withdrawal. No right to cut off her allowance. And then the goat just collapsed, right in the fountain. You blink. The words get stranger the longer you listen. Apparently someone's cousin is sleeping in a bureau. Someone else has a new lover and a collection of stolen silver spoons. There's mention of an apricot scandal that may or may not involve a bishop. You sit by the window, wide-eyed and slack-jawed, utterly transfixed. You're not getting any sleep, but you're getting content. Historians still argue whether these shared-wall townhouses fostered a unique intimacy or a collective descent into paranoia. Either way, everyone knew everyone's business, especially at night. This was long before earplugs, privacy glass, or the concept of indoor voices. You keep listening, cheek pressed to the pane, until your breath fogs the glass and your knees ache from crouching. You finally pull back, shivering a little, and realize you've been crouched in full sheepfat shine for nearly 20 minutes. You return to bed. This time, you don't even bother adjusting the pillow. You flop onto your back and exhale the words, Pierre's withdrawal, into the ceiling. Sleep feels possible now. Not guaranteed, but circling. You let your eyes close. Almost. And then, scritch. You freeze. It's not from the ceiling this time. It's under the bed. Something scratches faintly against the floorboards. You open one eye. You consider the chamber pot cabinet. Unlikely. You consider divine punishment. Possible. You consider mice. Yes. Most likely mice. But it's a deliberate kind of scratching. Like someone organizing their tiny rodent tax returns. You groan. Then try to ignore it. You fail. You sit up again and mutter, I swear, if you're reenacting Hamlet under there, I will lose what remains of my mind. The scratching stops. You stare at the silence. Then, cautiously, lie back down. The room is quiet. Too quiet. Then, a soft thud. Not loud. Just enough to make your stomach tighten like a drawstring purse. You close your eyes. This time, you don't even try to sleep. You just focus on breathing slowly. In. Out. In. Out. You count. 1 creak. 2 breaths. 3 imaginary goats falling into fountains. You smile faintly. This is ridiculous. And oddly comforting. You're awake, but not suffering. Just existing. In the odd, sleepless intimacy of 2:47 a.m., sheep fat drying on your face, a flute player presumably snoring somewhere in the east wing, and a mouse with excellent furniture sense tidying beneath your bed. Maybe you'll sleep next hour. Maybe not. But for now, it's enough to be wrapped in this strange, soft world of half-wakefulness. And maybe, just maybe, dream adjacent. Somewhere between thoughts of apricot scandals and the slow orchestration of underbed mice, you find yourself drifting again, closer this time. But sleep still plays hard to get, like a fussy aristocrat who refuses to attend your mental soiree without at least 3 formal invitations and a respectable cheese tray. Your mouth is dry. Very dry. The sheep fat may be moisturizing your face into next week, but your tongue feels like it's been aged in a salt mine. You sit up, again, and reach for the tin cup by your bed. Empty. Of course. You consider venturing downstairs for water. But stairs require effort. Effort requires pants. So instead, you wander toward your dressing table where, among brushes, sachets, and a somewhat haunted-looking doll that you do not remember owning, you locate a small clay bottle. Herbal tonic. Handwritten label. Faint ink. Smells faintly of old lettuce. You sniff it. Yep. Lettuce. Again. Mainstream historical fact. Lettuce-based insomnia remedies were more than just tea. 18th century apothecaries offered everything from syrups and tinctures to alcohol-infused lettuce tonics, often paired with calming herbs like valerian, chamomile, and sometimes poppy seed extracts, though those veered dangerously close to narcotic territory. Lettuce was prized for its sedative milk, a white sap known as lactucarium. You uncork the bottle and take a sip. It's worse than the tea. This one tastes like boiled parchment soaked in cough syrup and served with a twist of sorrow. You instantly regret every life choice that led to this moment. But strangely, it warms your throat and chest. Not a burn, more like a wool blanket unfolding somewhere behind your ribs. You wobble back toward bed, mentally noting that lettuce overdose is a silly-sounding way to die but, under the circumstances, not implausible. You climb under the covers again, propped slightly on your side this time, your cheek now resting against the cool edge of the pillow. The sheep fat has seeped into the fabric completely, leaving behind a soft halo that smells faintly like an herbal roast. It's oddly comforting. Your breathing slows. You begin to doze. And then, as always, a thought interrupts. What if I try aromatics? You groan. But your brain, that relentless intern who just won't clock out, insists it could help. Quirky historical tidbit: aromatherapy was fashionable among 18th century insomniacs. Sachets of lavender, marjoram, and chamomile were placed under pillows or burned gently as incense. But some remedies were stranger. One infamous concoction involved heating dried toad skin, wormwood, and badger fat, then inhaling the vapors through a linen funnel. Yes, really. You shuffle to the coffer at the foot of your bed. Inside, a muslin pouch labeled serenite D herbs. You sniff it. Lavender, clearly. Some dried rose. Maybe a whisper of mint. Harmless. Then you find the jar labeled Huile de Blaireau. Badger oil. You hesitate. The idea of dabbing your temples with anything derived from badgers feels like crossing a line. But you're already smeared in sheep fat and hallucinating flute boys, so what's one more indignity? You dab a tiny drop onto your wrists. It's thick. Unpleasantly so. The scent is musky, earthy, and let's be honest, more feral raccoon than spa tranquility. But after a moment, it softens. Blends with the lavender sachet and settles into something faintly bearable. You tuck the pouch near your pillow and flop back down. Historians still argue whether these early scent therapies had a physical sedative effect or were purely psychological rituals built to make the mind believe it could let go. Some suggest the real impact was in the preparation, the gathering of herbs, the lighting of coals, the careful timing. The sense of control over something as mysterious as sleep. You breathe deeply. Again. Again. The scent grounds you. It's not pleasant, but it's real. You roll onto your stomach, one leg out, arms sprawled like a starfish that gave up on French society. Your mind, for once, is quieter. Thoughts drift in, then float away. Like fish behind glass. The world softens. The house seems to hold its breath. Until, of course, someone sneezes. Loud. Downstairs. Violent enough to scare dust out of the rafters. You jolt. Of course. Because serenity, in this house, is always on a timer. You try to let the sneeze pass. But now you're wondering, was it your uncle? Your aunt? The flautist? Is the badger oil affecting them, too? You imagine the entire household awake, slightly greasy, wandering through darkened halls in slow motion like an uncoordinated séance. You chuckle to yourself. Quietly. Then settle again. Let the mattress take your weight. Let the scent of herbs and woodland creatures lull you. One more breath. One more sip of air. And there it is again, sleep. Not running at you full speed, but stepping closer. Like it might finally sit beside you. You close your eyes. This time, for real. Maybe. This time, you almost make it. You can feel it. Sleep stretches one long finger, trailing it down your spine like a lullaby written in Morse code. Your muscles melt. Your breathing evens out. Your mind drifts to a field of what? Lettuce. Sheep. Lettuce on sheep. It doesn't matter. The point is, you're going, gone, until your foot twitches. Violently. That jolt, that ridiculous betrayal of a limb, snaps you back from the brink with all the grace of a pigeon slamming into a window. You gasp. Sit bolt upright. And curse softly into the linen air, mon pied traitor. Mainstream historical fact. The phenomenon of the hypnic jerk or sleep start was well known even in the 18th century, though they called it more poetic things like le saut d'ombre, the shadow jolt. Some believed it was your soul trying to escape the body prematurely, while others thought it was simply indigestion with a flair for the dramatic. You rub your ankle and sigh. The room is still dim, still hushed, but now a little less magical. The flute boy is gone. The mice are silent. Your uncle, hopefully, has stopped sneezing. Everything feels poised on the edge of something, like a theater after the final bow. You flop back into bed with the resigned weight of a person who has tried everything. Sheep fat. Flutes. Lettuce tea. Mystery tincture. Badger-based aromatherapy. At this point, the only cure left might be blunt force trauma, and you're not quite ready to commit to headbutting the bedpost. Your fingers drum against the blanket. A thought rises, uninvited, like a bubble in a stagnant pond. What about geometry? You squint at the ceiling, offended by your own mind. But too late, your brain has latched onto the idea. Count the beams. Measure the angles. Divide the room into perfect, quiet slices. Quirky historical tidbit, some Enlightenment thinkers recommended mathematical recitation as a sleep aid. The theory went that, by focusing the mind on orderly patterns, multiples, prime numbers, sequences, it could untangle anxiety and slowly seduce the intellect into silence. For example, count backward by threes from 1000. Or recite Pascal's triangle until you collapse. You begin mentally calculating the area of your bedroom. Approximately 4 meters by 5. Assuming minor indentations for decorative molding. Ceiling height. Maybe 3 meters at the peak. Total volume of air. Roughly 60 cubic meters. You imagine it, filling your lungs. All 60 cubic meters of it, shared between you and the ghosts of insomnia past. You shift on the mattress. Begin reciting prime numbers under your breath. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. It's boring. Which is perfect? 17, 19, 23. You hit a snag at 29. Is 31 prime? You debate this. Then debate your life choices. You stop counting. Historians still argue whether these early cognitive methods were genuine science or just a clever way to disguise desperation. It is easier, one French physician wrote, to lull the mind with order than to bury it under worry. Another claimed numbers themselves emitted subtle harmonies of the mind, which feels like the long-lost ancestor of modern sound therapy, or possibly just an excuse to make sleep sound like philosophy homework. You sit up again and decide to escalate. You reach for the heavy sleep manual your aunt gifted you, titled in gold script, Méthodes douces pour l'esprit agite. Soft methods for the agitated mind. It's a thick volume. Slightly too heavy for comfort. Smells like dust, lavender, and faint disapproval. You flip to the chapter titled Somnolent Calculations. It reads, begin by visualizing a perfect white square. Place it on a soft grey background. Now, count the squares within the square. Divide each into 4. Then again. Until only silence remains. You stare at the page. Your eyebrows knit. Is this math or witchcraft? You close the book. Gently. Respectfully. Then bury it under your pillow like a cursed object you're not ready to return to the earth. You lie back down. Your eyes sting with effort. Your body wants sleep. Your mind is just being fussy about the terms. You begin reciting the day in reverse, moment by moment, like pressing rewind on a particularly chaotic play. You remember brushing your teeth with something minty and questionably gritty. You remember dinner, overcooked venison, your aunt's lecture about moon-based gardening, your cousin trying to make a spoon disappear in his sleeve. You remember stepping into the hallway and feeling the heavy drag of fatigue, like someone had slipped a wet quilt over your shoulders. You remember being a little happier than usual, because, for once, everyone else looked just as tired as you felt. You smirk, eyes closed now. The room is finally still. You've stopped fighting. There's a peculiar peace that comes when you've tried every cure, every potion, every whiff of questionable oil and realize that, oddly enough, you're still alive. Still breathing. Still blinking. Still, kind of okay. You yawn. And this time, no twitch follows. Just warmth. And softness. And that delicious drowsiness that teases just behind your eyelids. You're close again. Not trying. Just drifting. A quiet surrender. And then, a creak on the stairs. You smile. Because of course. The stair creak is followed by silence. Not the comfortable, tucked in and safe kind of silence, but the suspicious kind. The kind that makes your ears perk up and your imagination whisper, what if it's not the cat this time? You lie still. 1 heartbeat. 2. Then 3. Then another creak. Slower. Like someone tiptoeing in wool socks made of shame. You know those stairs. You've heard every creak they have to offer. That was step 4, right near the wobbly baluster. And now, step 5. You exhale, more annoyed than afraid. If it's an intruder, they'll be extremely disappointed to find a half-asleep, sheep-fat-slicked human in a nightshirt wielding a chamomile sachet. Mainstream historical fact: many upper-class French homes of the 18th century were built with deliberately creaky staircases, not as a design flaw, but as an informal security measure. Wealthy homeowners wanted to hear if someone was coming or going in the night. Which is noble, unless you're the one trying to sneak into the pantry for midnight jam. You sit up, listening intently. The sound stops again. No footsteps. No wind. Then, faintly, the subtle squeal of a door hinge. One of the sitting rooms. Possibly the green salon, where your aunt stores all her forbidden marmalade and discarded political pamphlets. A very specific part of you, the feral, midnight forager within, considers the possibility that someone else has also failed to sleep. That someone is rifling through the marmalade stash for comfort. You're torn. On one hand, this could be a criminal. On the other, it could be your cousin Lucien trying to emotionally recover from losing at cards by binge-eating quince spread. Curiosity wins. You rise from bed again, quietly, nobly, begrudgingly. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and tiptoe to the hallway, where shadows stretch long and sleepy across the floor. Quirky historical tidbit: some insomniacs in the 18th century treated their sleeplessness with slow, silent walks through the house, what one physician called domestic perambulation. They believed that mild movement, paired with candlelight and a repetitive visual environment, could quiet the mind better than lying still and suffering. Your perambulation begins. One slippered foot, then the other. You pass the stairwell, gaze flicking toward the green salon. Light spills from the cracked door. You edge closer. There, hunched at the small table with a spoon in one hand and an open jar in the other, is Lucien. Hair tousled, eyes puffy, looking like a man halfway through both a nervous breakdown and a raspberry cleanse. He sees you. You stare at each other in the flickering lamplight. Then he holds up the jar, as if offering a peace treaty. Marmalade, he whispers. You nod. Of course. You take a seat beside him. He finds you a second spoon. The two of you eat directly from the jar, because dignity is a myth and raspberry seeds are grounding. Lucien speaks first. Couldn't sleep. You shake your head. You. He sighs. I tried valerian, flute music, and a 4-paragraph prayer I don't think I even believe in. You nod. Sheep fat. Lucien blinks. Ah. You both fall quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. Historians still argue whether these impromptu nocturnal gatherings were symptoms of broader sleep disturbances or simply a byproduct of a more flexible, segmented sleep cycle. There's growing belief that people back then experienced first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful period in between used for reflection, prayer, or, apparently, shared jam. You and Lucien take slow, tired bites. Eventually, he chuckles. Remember when Aunt Claudine tried to sell everyone on that goat-fat nose plug thing? You laugh, softly. And she made us all try it after dinner? He nods. I couldn't breathe for 6 hours. But I did forget about my taxes. You pass the spoon back and forth, speaking less and less. Not from boredom, but because it no longer feels necessary. After a while, Lucien stands. I think I'll try sleeping again. You nod. You're not sure if it's the sugar crash, the warmth, or the fact that your brain finally gave up, but something is shifting. You feel heavier. Not the unpleasant kind. The pleasant kind. Like you're being wrapped, inch by inch, in something warm and slow. You walk back to your room. The flautist is still missing. Or maybe sleeping in your aunt's conservatory under an embroidered curtain. The hallway is still. You like it this way. No scratching. No stairs. No mysterious jam heists. You slip under the covers once more. The pillow welcomes you like an old friend. The badger oil has faded. The sheep fat is now just part of your face. Your breath moves in and out in quiet waves. You don't expect sleep anymore. You're just here. And somehow, that's enough. The last image in your mind before your thoughts scatter again, two tired cousins, whispering under the golden flicker of a stolen midnight lamp, passing spoons like secrets. The moment holds, then fades. And this time, finally, so do you. Sleep comes, but only for a short while. You don't even realize you've drifted off until you wake up confused, twisted in the sheets like a croissant gone rogue. It's still dark. Still quiet. Your mouth is dry again, your ankle itches, and your hair has formed an unauthorized alliance with the pillowcase. The worst part? You're more tired now than before. That cruel version of tired. The why did I even bother? Tired. The kind that fills your limbs with warm sand and your thoughts with fog but refuses to let you sink. You flip the pillow. Then you flip again. Then you consider setting the entire bed on fire and sleeping on the floor instead. Mainstream historical fact. Many people in 18th century France didn't sleep in uninterrupted blocks. Segmented sleep was common, one bout in the early evening, a waking period around midnight to 2 a.m., then a second bout until sunrise. During the waking stretch, people would read, pray, or socialize softly. Some even journaled their dreams before diving back into bed. You are currently stuck between bouts. So you get up again, because of course you do, and shuffle to the vanity to splash your face with rosewater. It's cool, calming, and smells faintly of a grandmother who knows secrets. Your reflection blinks at you. You look like a ghost who regrets staying for dessert. Time to try something new. You open your nightstand drawer and pull out a small, leather-bound book with gold lettering. It's your Insomnia journal. Half blank, half incoherent mutterings written during other sleepless nights. You flip through pages. Try no stew at supper. Flute boy equals too handsome, suspicious, and a diagram of what appears to be a lettuce leaf wearing a crown. Quirky historical tidbit. Many 18th century thinkers believed that tracking dreams, emotions, and bodily cycles could help align one's sleep patterns. Sleep journals, often part diary, part symptom tracker, were especially popular among wealthier women, some of whom turned theirs into beautifully illuminated manuscripts complete with pressed herbs and sleep poems. You dip your quill into the inkwell, which you keep next to your emergency raisins, and begin to write. Our unknown. Possibly 3. My pillow is whispering to me again. Still smells of sheep and regret. I miss the flautist. I suspect he's a figment of my brain, sent by the lettuce gods. You pause. Then draw a tiny flute. You are losing your mind, but at least you're documenting it. You return to bed and try another technique from the journal, visualized stillness. You close your eyes and imagine a painting. Not just any painting. A still life. One of those elegant, overly detailed 18th century ones with a bowl of fruit, a wine glass, and maybe one too many dead birds arranged dramatically on a silk napkin. You zoom in on the grapes. You imagine the texture of the skin. The way they glisten. The weight of the bunch. You move to the candle in the corner of the scene. The wax dripping slowly. The way the light catches the rim of the silver plate. You hold it all still. No movement. Just stillness. Historians still argue whether these visualization practices, borrowed from religious meditation and artistic observation, had a measurable impact on sleep. Some say they trained the mind to slow. Others argue they simply distracted people from the fact that their mattress was made of straw and poor life decisions. You continue your imagined tour. Now a peeled orange. Its skin lies coiled beside it, serpentine. The inner fruit glows with reflected light. You smell citrus even though you absolutely don't have an orange anywhere nearby. Your brain is filling in the gaps. Your breath slows. The scene holds. Still. Still. Then your eye twitches. One sudden jerk and the painting vanishes. Replaced by the urgent thought. Did I leave my stockings on the windowsill? You groan. The magic's gone. You toss onto your other side, kicking the blanket slightly out of spite. Outside the window, the faintest thread of dawn is starting to unravel across the sky. Not light enough for birdsong, but just enough to make the darkness feel less committed. Your body aches in that way that says, you've been horizontal for too long, but not in the good way. You stare at the ceiling, which now has a spider inching slowly across one beam. You consider naming it. You decide on Gaston. Good morning, Gaston, you whisper. Gaston does not reply, but you feel oddly comforted anyway. You sigh, then whisper into the room, I surrender. Again. For the 10th time tonight. But this time, you really mean it. You stop trying. You don't count. You don't breathe mindfully. You don't recite math. You just lie there. Like a tired sack of ideas and lavender-scented failure. And here's the thing, it kind of works. Because eventually, without you noticing when, it all fades. The sheep fat. The flute boy. The apricot bishop. Gone. And you are nothing but breath and warm fabric and the slow sigh of your body saying, enough. It's unclear how long you sleep. But when you blink your eyes open again, the room is painted in that early grey haze, too late for moonlight, too early for certainty. Just the kind of vague illumination that makes everything look either gently blessed or vaguely haunted. And yet, you feel something different this time. Your limbs aren't heavy. Your mind isn't racing. You don't immediately contemplate setting your mattress on fire. It's not full rest, exactly, but it's enough. You've reached the rare, fragile plateau of half-rested but not furious about it. Mainstream historical fact: many French households, particularly in urban areas, timed their routines not around a single sleep but 2 or more sleep sessions, with rituals in between. This segmented sleep wasn't seen as a failure, but part of a natural rhythm. People accepted the wakeful hours as a time to reflect, snack, whisper with loved ones, or consult strange little booklets about how best to inhale cooked lettuce steam. You remain under the covers. You don't move at first. Just listen. Nothing creaks. The mice are either asleep or unionized. Gaston the spider is nowhere to be seen, probably off to write angry letters about light pollution. Your body is still, but your brain feels curious. Not anxious. Not wired. Just that slow, soft pull toward thought. You let it happen. You think about the lettuce tonic. The spoon shared in silent conspiracy. The way your cousin Lucien's face looked slightly more peaceful when illuminated by a midnight marmalade glow. You think about the way your fingers moved through the pages of your Insomnia journal, half artist, half lunatic. You think about the flautist. Still not sure if he was real. Possibly a figment. Possibly the sleep version of a houseplant, decorative, fragile, mildly judgmental. Quirky historical tidbit: some nobles swore by hiring dream interpreters to visit them in the midnight gap between first and second sleep. These weren't fortune tellers in the mystical sense, but rather therapists in powdered wigs, tasked with soothing the mind through gentle, symbolic chatter. Think Freud, but with lace cuffs. You turn onto your back and stare at the ceiling. You feel the echo of a dream. Not the dream itself, just the ghost of its texture. Like something once folded and now unfolded too quickly. You remember a hallway lined with teacups. You remember whispering to a loaf of bread that seemed to understand your grief. You remember flying, briefly. Not with wings, but with 2 large, supportive sheep lifting you by the armpits. You smile at that. Historians still argue whether the waking mind can truly understand the logic of dream space, or whether dreams exist in a different grammar entirely, a soup of sensation that memory tries too hard to translate. Some believed dreams were divine dispatches. Others thought they were simply your soul's way of processing indigestion and unresolved flautist tension. You sit up slowly. The air in the room is chilled now, but not cruel. A soft draft moves the edge of the curtain. You shuffle to the window and peek outside. The street is still cloaked in quiet. A few early vendors wheeling carts. A baker lighting his oven. A neighbor arguing with his rooster again. The world is waking up. And you've survived the night. You didn't sleep like a pampered duchess or a heavily sedated goat. But you made it. You glance back at your bed, slightly rumpled, a little greasy, still holding the faint scent of herbs and regret. You feel a strange sort of fondness for it now. A battle was fought here. You didn't win exactly, but you're still standing. And that counts. You return to the vanity and splash your face again. The rose water feels like an apology from the universe. You reach for the small tin of scented wax and dab a bit behind each ear. Lavender and orange. Fresh. Hopeful. Slightly edible. You pull on your house robe, thick, embroidered, and exactly one size too dramatic, and step softly into the hallway. Everyone else still sleeps. Or maybe they're pretending to, out of politeness. You walk past the green salon. There's an empty marmalade jar sitting like a little trophy on the windowsill. You nod at it. A quiet salute to Lucien, wherever he may be. In the kitchen, you heat a small kettle. You consider the lettuce tea again, then slide it politely into a drawer and opt for something safer. Chamomile. With a hint of anise. You pour it into a delicate blue cup and carry it back to your room like you've just won something. And maybe you have. Not sleep. Not entirely. But something better. Proof. Proof that you can exist in this strange middle place between night and day, between rest and wake, between dream and whatever jam-fueled semi-reality this house currently operates in. You sip slowly. Each swallow feels like a closing bracket around the night. Not an exclamation point. Just a soft, lowercase amen. You set the cup down. Return to your bed. Not to sleep, but just to be. You lie there, propped gently against the pillow, sipping what may be your fifth hot beverage of the night. Or morning. Time has lost its crisp edges and now feels more like soup, warm, vague, and slightly overcooked. Your cup sits on the windowsill, catching the first golden blush of the sun as it peeks between chimneys and shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a milk cart rattles by. A sleepy dog barks once, then immediately regrets it. And yet, you still feel alert. Not energetic. Certainly not refreshed. But calmly awake. The kind of awake that doesn't demand anything from you, just a slow drift forward. Mainstream historical fact: French households during the Enlightenment often began their days slowly, especially among the upper and educated classes. There was no jarring alarm bell. Waking up was a process, sometimes taking hours. Gentle stretching, quiet prayers, slow breakfasts, and most charmingly, listening to music or reading letters in bed were all part of the soft open to one's day. And because you're already awake, and gently half-dressed in sheep-fat saturated nightwear, you decide to treat yourself to one of the era's most decadent luxuries. Doing absolutely nothing. You don't tidy the bed. You don't fetch fresh linens. You just lie there like a socially anxious croissant and let the early light spill over your face. Your thoughts drift, like ducks in a lazy pond. You remember reading once about tonal harmonics for brain stillness, a theory that certain frequencies, especially in flutes or viols, could lull the mind into deeper rest, even without true sleep. Which, let's be honest, sounds suspiciously like the flautist's job description. Quirky historical tidbit: some 18th century physicians prescribed daily exposure to melodic air, especially for anxious or sleepless individuals. It was believed that listening to slow, repetitive instrumental music could help untangle mental vapors. Some households even paid live musicians to stand outside their bedroom doors and play a short suite before dawn. You imagine hiring your own flute boy full-time. He'd play one song at 5 a.m., then disappear silently into the linen cupboard. A perfect existence. You're considering this fantasy when you hear footsteps in the corridor. Not hurried. Not panicked. Just soft shuffles. Then, a knock on your door. Not a real knock, more like a polite suggestion from a fist that's afraid to commit. You say, "OUI?" The door cracks open. Your aunt's maid peeks in, her eyes a little puffy, hair wrapped in an early morning scarf. She carries a tray. "Madam thought you might be still engaged in the night's challenges," she says, placing it down near the foot of your bed. You nod solemnly, as though accepting the terms of a peace treaty. The tray holds a soft roll, a dish of preserves, a wedge of cheese that smells like its own philosophy student, and mercifully a cup of proper coffee. You thank her. She smiles faintly. Monsieur Lucien has requested an additional jar of raspberry. No one knows why. You raise a single eyebrow. She shrugs. He said something about dreams and sheep. I didn't ask questions. Historians still argue whether this period of dawn slowness was purely cultural or a physiological reaction to living in a world without electric light. Some modern scholars believe it was a healthy compromise, letting the brain gently shift gears between unconscious and conscious, without demanding an immediate leap into productivity. A liminal space, where people could exist in between. You take a bite of the roll. It's warm. Fluffy. The preserves taste even better when consumed while slightly deranged from sleep deprivation. The cheese is pungent. You respect it from a distance. Coffee, however, coffee is everything. The bitter warmth hits your tongue like a bell that rings just inside your ribs. It doesn't make you jittery, but it clarifies things. Just enough to remember that today exists. You stare out the window. People are beginning to move. A girl in a blue apron carries a basket of greens. 2 boys race a hoop down the cobbled lane. A man with a magnificent mustache tries to wrestle a chicken back into its crate, and the chicken is clearly winning. You smile. You may not have slept much, but you've witnessed the odd ballet of the 18th century night. Flutes, lotions, geometry, and jam. And now, morning joins the stage. Not in a loud way. Just one golden toe at a time. You finish your coffee. You pat the sheep fat, which has now fully absorbed into your skin like some strange night mask sent from the gods of livestock. You look at yourself in the mirror and think, not bad, considering. Your mind begins its first yawn of the day. Not a loud one. Just the suggestion of tiredness waiting to circle back. Perhaps you'll nap after lunch. Perhaps you'll nod off mid-conversation with Lucien, right as he starts describing the spiritual symbolism of marmalade. You don't dread it. Because now, you've made peace with the rhythm. The sleeplessness, the rituals, the weird in-between space that lives between hours. You survived the night. And somewhere, deep in your bones, you can feel a softness returning. Not full sleep, but a softness. A promise. You draw the curtain open wider and let the light in fully. The curtain breathes in the breeze, lifting just enough to give the illusion that the window itself is exhaling. You sit quietly, wrapped in your dramatic robe, sipping the last of the lukewarm coffee, watching the day begin like you're the exhausted monarch of this narrow, cobbled kingdom. And though you are tired, bone deep, slightly mush-brained tired, you feel something peculiar forming at the edges of your awareness. Satisfaction. You didn't conquer insomnia, but you did outlast it. You danced with it, fed it sheep fat, gave it a name, listened to its flute solo, and now, it's shrinking in your rearview mirror like an awkward dinner guest who finally took the hint. Mainstream historical fact, in 18th century France, particularly among intellectuals and members of the salon culture, it was fashionable to write reflective letters in the early morning hours, summaries of the night's thoughts or dreams, written with poetic flourish and shared among close confidants. These letters weren't about productivity, they were about intimacy. An invitation to witness the inner world of a restless mind. You shuffle to your writing desk. The ink is ready. The quill is still damp from last night's lettuce-fueled doodles. You flip to a new page. To whom it may concern, mostly myself, I remain alive. My skin is slippery, my cousin is jam-intoxicated, and I may or may not be haunted by an invisible flautist named Etienne. Sleep did not arrive, but instead left a calling card. I accept this. You stop there. Because, honestly, that about sums it up. You stretch, finally, fully, your arms lifting until your fingers brush the wooden beam above your head. The stretch feels earned. You make a sound somewhere between a sigh and a creaky cupboard. Outside, a street vendor begins shouting something about radishes. Loudly. With feeling. You respect the energy, even if your brain responds by flickering the too early sign across your frontal lobe. You pull your robe tighter and cross the room to your wardrobe. What does one wear after a night like this? You choose a soft linen shift and a loose, green overdress. Comfy. Presentable. Low threat. You dab a touch of rosewater behind your ears, not for others, but for your own sense of dignity. You're underslept, yes. But you refuse to be unkempt. Quirky historical tidbit. There was a brief moment in the 18th century when fashionable exhaustion became trendy. Dark under eyes and paleness were romanticized as signs of depth, sensitivity, and artistic temperament. Some even exaggerated their tired look with a little powder and charcoal to seem more poetic. The soulfully weary aesthetic. You glance at your reflection again. You could pass for a minor poet recovering from a dramatic breakup with a violinist. Excellent. Downstairs, the household is beginning to hum. You hear cutlery clink, floorboards creak, and the faint sound of someone singing off-key in the scullery. Probably the butcher's boy again, still working through puberty. Bless him. You descend the stairs slowly. Your feet know which ones creak now. You step around them like a nighttime thief with excellent etiquette. In the dining room, Lucien sits slouched at the table, nursing a mug of something dark and ominous. His eyes are half closed. His hair resembles an abandoned bird's nest. He glances up as you enter. Still human, he rasps. Barely, you reply. He nods, solemn. I dreamed I was being chased by sentient fruit preserves. You sit across from him. That sounds accurate. He pushes a plate toward you, bread, butter, and a tiny pot of, yes, raspberry. You earned it, he says. You spread it onto your toast in reverent silence. Historians still argue whether mornings in 18th century households were truly tranquil, or if this romanticized version is simply what people wanted to remember. Diaries from the time often paint a gentle picture, sunlight through lace curtains, warm bread, hushed conversation, but those same diaries also mention forgotten chamber pots and loud goats. Reality, as ever, was textured. You eat. You breathe. The weariness behind your eyes is still there, but it's quiet now. Like a cat that's finally settled on your lap after hours of clawing the furniture. Lucien mutters something about planning to nap from noon till Judgment Day. You nod in agreement. Naps have never sounded more heroic. You don't feel like moving just yet. So you sit with your cousin in companionable silence, listening to the sleepy house adjust itself into morning. Someone sneezes 3 rooms over. A chair scrapes. A pigeon walks boldly across the window ledge, pausing to glare at you before flying off in a huff. And in that strange, gentle moment, you realize, this is the real cure. Not flutes. Not lettuce syrup. Not aromatics with questionable animal origins. But this quiet company, soft light, a body that didn't sleep but still survived the night. You survived it with your humor intact, your mind mostly unscathed, and your dignity only mildly compromised. And now, you can finally rest. Even if you don't sleep. Because somehow, you already feel better. You don't remember falling asleep exactly. You remember finishing your toast. You remember Lucien saying something about how jam is an emotional state. And then, everything starts blurring into the soft static of a late morning nap. You didn't plan it. You didn't schedule it. It just arrived, like a kind houseguest slipping into the room with clean shoes and a warm blanket, asking for nothing, offering everything. And when you wake again, this time for real, it's noon. Mainstream historical fact. Napping during the day was not only accepted in 18th century French culture but often encouraged, especially among the upper classes and clergy. Afternoon rest was considered restorative, essential for one's nerves and digestion, and a natural follow-up to segmented sleep. It wasn't laziness, it was hygienic repose. Your eyes blink open slowly. Your body doesn't protest as it did before. No sharp stabs of fatigue behind your eyes. No panicked inventory of failed sleep attempts. Just that warm, melted feeling of having been surrendered to rest. You've napped yourself into a different dimension. You feel fresh. Well, fresh in the 18th century sense. Which means, slightly sweaty, gently crumpled, and emotionally stable enough to face whatever your eccentric aunt has planned for the afternoon. You sit up in bed. The sheet is tangled around your ankle like a lazy ghost snake. You free yourself with grace. Actually, you trip a little, but we're romanticizing now, remember? Outside the window, the world is fully alive. Vendors are shouting. Bells are chiming. Someone somewhere is having an argument that involves multiple ducks. You take it all in with the serenity of a woman who has, at long last, managed a full 90 minutes of unbroken unconsciousness. You stretch. You feel taller. You feel like maybe, just maybe, you could take on something mildly demanding, like reading a book or moving from one chair to another without groaning. Quirky historical tidbit: there was a short-lived trend among salon-goers in Paris to stage nap salons, social events where attendees would discuss dreams, lie on velvet cushions, sip cool lavender water, and then all fall asleep for an hour in a beautifully decorated drawing room. The host would gently wake everyone at a designated moment with soft harpsichord music and herbal candies. Truly, peak decadence. You make a mental note to start your own nap salon. Maybe after a snack. Downstairs again, the household is transitioning into its second wind. The cook is banging pots with unnecessary drama. Your aunt is reorganizing her brooches for no clear reason. And Lucien. He's passed out on the parlor couch with a cloth napkin over his face like a tragic, jam-haunted poet. You tiptoe past. Your brain is clearer now. Less fog. Fewer whispers about flautists. The sheep fat sheen has faded from your skin, leaving it, actually quite dewy. You might be inventing 18th century skincare trends without meaning to. Historians still argue whether many of the bizarre-sounding sleep remedies of the time, like rubbing goose lard on your temples or placing warmed bricks under your feet, were based on any science at all, or simply elaborate distractions to keep people from spiraling into full emotional collapse. Some modern researchers think these rituals worked because they gave the mind something gentle to fixate on. And maybe that's the point, you think, as you pour yourself a glass of watered wine. Maybe sleep isn't something you conquer like a battle, but something you court. Like a shy animal. Or a noble with a powdered wig who only attends parties after 3 handwritten invitations and an offer of pastries. You drink slowly. You're no longer in that twitchy, caffeinated daze. The quiet that follows good rest, even short rest, has settled over you like a blanket. And now, the afternoon is yours. You could write a letter to your friend Henriette, describing the sheep fat experiment with full theatrical flair. You could revisit your Insomnia journal and rate each remedy with tiny angry stars. You could even go outside, walk by the river, and pretend you're the heroine in a novel who didn't spend the entire night whispering to a spider and fantasizing about flute solos. But instead, you just sit. Sit and breathe. And feel. You don't need to do anything. That's the secret no one tells you. The aftermath of insomnia doesn't always demand productivity, it demands gentleness. With yourself. With your weird, beautiful, sleepless body. You lean back in your chair and let the breeze tickle your ankles. The sounds of the street mingle with the rustling leaves, and it almost feels like music. No flute required. You find your way outside not long after. The garden is still soaked in last night's humidity, the grass squishy underfoot and the lavender bushes leaning dramatically like they, too, didn't sleep quite right. The sun's risen high now, golden, insistent, but not unkind. You walk slowly. No rush. No agenda. Just the simple act of moving through space without needing to solve anything. Mainstream historical fact: for those struggling with sleep, physicians in 18th century France often recommended light afternoon promenades in nature, especially in air thick with green, meaning tree-shaded areas. They believed the mix of filtered sunlight, damp soil scent, and repetitive footfall soothed the nervous humors that made rest so difficult the night before. You circle the gravel path, then follow the mossy stone steps toward the arbor, where your aunt keeps a few weathered wicker chairs and an extremely judgmental cat named Voltaire. He's already lounging on one, eyes narrowed like he knows everything about your night and has chosen not to intervene out of sheer aristocratic spite. You sit beside him anyway. He flicks his tail in subtle disapproval. It's peaceful here. Not silent, just balanced. The gentle trill of insects. The creak of wood. Somewhere nearby, someone stirring a pot, probably with more force than necessary. You think you smell fennel. You close your eyes and lean back. Quirky historical tidbit. Some French apothecaries created sleep gardens behind their shops, small enclosed spaces filled with carefully chosen plants believed to calm the mind and body. Valerian, lavender, chamomile, hyssop, and lemon balm were planted in specific arrangements, not just for aesthetics, but to create a subtle blend of scent that drifted up to nearby windows. Passers-by were invited to stroll or even nap in these green havens. You open your eyes again, half expecting someone to have appeared with a flute. They haven't. Which is honestly disappointing. You're considering starting your own herbal nap park, with mandatory marmalade breaks and a silent flautist on retainer, when Lucien appears at the top of the path. He's wrapped in what looks like a throw blanket, sipping something murky from a clay mug, and moving like he's been gently rearranged by gravity overnight. You look, he begins, squinting at you, conscious. I napped. He nods as if you've just confessed to a small but noble crime. Me too, he says. I dreamed I was married to a lettuce. That explains a lot, you reply. He settles in next to you, sighing like someone with absolutely nothing left to prove. Voltaire gives him a slow blink of disapproval, then begins licking his paw as if sleep hygiene is a moral failing. The two of you sit in silence for a while. Not the kind of silence that aches. The good kind. The we made it kind. Historians still argue whether people in the 1700s truly believed in the medicinal properties of these long, quiet sittings in nature, or if they were simply indulging a deeper need to escape the bustle, the politics, the powdered wigs, the endless dinner conversations about claret. Either way, it seemed to work. At least a little. Lucien nudges your arm. Tonight, he says, we try the dried poppy tea. You shake your head. Absolutely not. I still can't feel my left eyebrow from the last time. He grins, then adds, we could just not try anything. You blink. You mean, just go to bed like normal people? He raises a brow. Exactly. No lotions. No flutes. No theology. Just a pillow and a prayer. It's a tempting thought. Maybe all the rituals, the fat, the herbs, the quiet music, the impromptu jam seances, maybe they helped. Maybe they were a distraction. Maybe they were just the 18th century version of doom scrolling. But maybe sometimes you just need to go to bed and say, we'll try again tomorrow. You both sit there a little longer, not making plans, not strategizing, not ranking essential oils by failure rate. Just resting. Voltaire yawns, which you take as a sign of approval. Or contempt. It's hard to tell. Eventually you rise, slow and reluctant, and make your way back inside. Lucien ambles behind you like a man who has learned exactly one lesson and intends to forget it by sundown. Back in your room, the bed is waiting, no longer the enemy, just a soft shape that held you through the storm. You pull the blanket smooth. Reposition the pillow. Fluff the edge nearest the wall. It feels good to prepare the space. Not as a battlefield, but as a welcome. You tidy the nightstand. You gently close your insomnia journal. You leave the window cracked just enough for a breeze, but not enough for Voltaire to sneak in and judge you at close range. Then you pause. In the mirror, you catch your reflection again. You're tired. Sure. But there's something else there now. A softness in your shoulders. A brightness behind the eyes. You survived. And somehow, that's beautiful. Evening has returned. You can feel it before you see it. The air thickens, the shadows stretch longer over the floorboards, and the world outside your window begins to dim itself politely, like a candle being snuffed in slow motion. There's no dramatic sunset. No triumphant trumpet blast. Just the gentle retreat of daylight, and the quiet reshuffling of the house back into its nighttime shape. Mainstream historical fact: in 18th century France, evening rituals were as layered and theatrical as any formal event. People would retire to their rooms around dusk, not to sleep immediately, but to ease into night. They might write letters, change into informal dress, apply scented pastes, or read by firelight. It was all about transitioning, not just physically, but mentally, from the chaos of day to the gentleness of night. And now, you begin your own descent into sleep, slowly, intentionally, almost ceremonially. First, the clothes. You slip out of your shift and into a fresh linen nightdress. Less sheep fat this time. Your skin's still suspiciously radiant from the last application, but you're not risking a repeat performance. A dab of lavender water on your temples instead. A little talc, lightly puffed onto the collarbone, mostly for the drama. Then, the bed. You turn down the sheet with the reverence of someone unwrapping a letter from an old friend. You fluff the pillow exactly twice. You adjust the curtain to filter the moonlight just right, not too bright but still enough to make the room feel like a soft secret. Lucian knocks once on the wall between your rooms. A new ritual. A wordless "we survived" from the next room over. You knock back twice. No translation needed. Quirky historical tidbit: some aristocratic families had designated knock codes between siblings or cousins, meant for late-night reassurance or gossip. It said Madame de Pompadour used a rhythmic code to summon her ladies-in-waiting for midnight reading sessions or to smuggle in forbidden cheese. You slip beneath the covers. This time, you don't brace yourself. You don't clench in anticipation of battle. You just lie down. Like sleep is not a test you must pass, but a visitor you trust to show up when it's ready. The room sighs around you. The blanket breathes against your legs. The pillow cools beneath your cheek. Somewhere, faintly, a flute plays. Or maybe it's just your imagination, replaying its favorite hallucination one last time. Historians still argue whether the power of ritual, of doing the same motions in the same order each night, had any measurable impact on sleep in the 1700s. But what's certain is that people clung to these habits like anchors. In a world of disease, war, and wildly unpredictable bread prices, a familiar bedtime routine might have been the most reliable comfort they had. You close your eyes. You don't chase sleep. You let it find you. You drift, not into deep dreams just yet, but into the soft in-between. That velvet limbo where your thoughts begin to thin, your limbs grow pleasantly distant, and your awareness narrows to the shape of your breath and the warmth around your ribs. The night doesn't feel like an enemy anymore. It feels like a quilt. A whisper. A story you already know the ending to. So now, here you are. Not quite awake, not fully dreaming. Just floating on the gentle tide between the two. The room around you has quieted to the point where even the silence has texture. The creak of wood, the distant tap of wind against glass, the slow rhythm of your own breath, all of it folding into the kind of hush that only comes when a night has been hard-earned. Your body is heavier now. Not in burden, but in release. Your hands have unclenched. Your jaw has softened. Your heartbeat hums, low and even, like a lullaby from somewhere deep inside. The images from the night drift past like soft clouds, lettuce steam, jam jars, an invisible flautist, a spider named Gaston. Funny, really. How something that once made you ache now makes you smile. You've made peace with the dark. With the weirdness. With the fact that not every night will come easy, and that's okay. Because now you know how to float with it, not fight it. You did what you could. And now, you rest. Let your breath stay slow. Let your thoughts grow thin. Let your body dissolve into the mattress, like mist sinking into earth. You're safe. You're home. And sleep, finally, sleep is coming. Gently, softly, without needing to be earned.